Hello, I'm Scott Heimendinger. I am very fortunate to have not one, but actually two dream jobs. I have them both at the same time. It would be totally silly for me to stand here and tell you how to go do that for yourself. So instead, I'm going to disguise this in telling you the things that I see in the rearview mirror that turned out to be really great advantages to getting where I'm at now. So first, let's start with my jobs. I'm the director of applied research at Modernist Cuisine. This is where I work. Modernist Cuisine is the world's premier culinary research lab. We study the science of cooking. We try to understand how food and cooking works, not for the purpose of making your crackers a little less expensive, but for the purpose of making food more delicious, achieving things in cuisine that you couldn't do without that scientific understanding. We publish our research in the form of these ginormous cookbooks. The first one, the big one, the 5-volume set, is the original Modernist Cuisine, came out in 2011, and then Modernist Cuisine at Home, Photography of Modernist Cuisine. We're working right now on a book that's going to be a little bit smaller than that 5-volume set, entirely dedicated to bread. So as you can tell, we're a little geeky. If you were to look inside one of these books, you might see something like this. This is our explanation of why steaming is sometimes slower than boiling, despite the fact that there's a lot more energy in steam than there is in boiling water. So this is my full-time job. My second full-time job is that I'm co-founder at Sansair. We create this device. It's a sous vide immersion circulator. We launched last year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about sous vide, but first, let's talk about where this started, my crooked, non-linear path. Because I work in culinary research, it should be fairly obvious that I started out in software. I went to school for information systems. I worked at IBM and then at Microsoft for 6 years. I worked on data. I was actually a program manager on the Excel team by the time I left Microsoft. My first bit of rearview mirror advice is that being ridiculously good at Excel will help you regardless of what industry you're in. If you're in the ditch digging industry, Excel will help you with that. Now, while I was at Microsoft, I developed this really intense, perhaps clinical passion for food and cooking. And so I did what anybody would naturally do when they get passionate about food and cooking. I started a food blog. It was called Scott's Food Blog. I hadn't hired the marketing team yet. And it was terrible. Like, I look back at this now, and it's the same reason that many people start a food blog. It's just a little kernel of narcissism trying to escape. But here's the thing. I really loved doing it, and I put a lot of time and energy into it. I did work. I dedicated evenings and weekends to working on projects, to creating new dishes, to cooking something. And I look back on the stuff that was there, and it was really awful. I mean, I'm sharing real terrible pictures with you so that anybody who is starting out in this and feeling discouraged can feel a little bit better. But doing this work turned out to be critically important. Maybe this is like my 10,000 hours kind of a thing, but I was developing all of these muscles without knowing it that would turn out to be highly beneficial later on. Then I had this egg that changed my life. I was at a restaurant in Seattle, and I ordered this dish, and it came with an egg that was cooked sous vide. Now, I could talk to you for days about sous vide cooking. Unfortunately, I don't have time for this, but let me say that this egg seemed to violate the laws of physics, and it was so incredible and special that it changed the course of the rest of my life. It was cooked sous vide. I'd never heard of this before. And so immediately I went online and devoured all of the information I could find, only to discover that sous vide machines, well, it didn't exist. People were using repurposed laboratory circulators to heat a bath of water to do this style of cooking. And those circulators cost $1,200. And I thought, well, that's stupid. It shouldn't cost $1,200 to heat water. So I reverse engineered it, and I posted the instructions. I rebranded my blog as Seattle Food Geek, and really steered into this geekiness. This post for the DIY $75 sous vide machine turned out to be really popular. I thought maybe 4 people would read it and go after it, but it actually was this powerful, popular thing. Make magazine picked it up and ran it. Huge badge of geek pride for that. My favorite, though, this is so cool. This happened just a couple of weeks ago. It got parodied on The Simpsons. In an itchy and scratchy cartoon where the cat disembowels himself. This was, and I didn't even know that I was randomly watching The Simpsons and saw this and then freaked out and wondered if maybe the mushrooms in dinner that night were psychotropic. I found, during this process, I like to say I found the right pond. People talk about being a big fish in a small pond or small fish in a big pond. I found the right pond. And for me, this pond was about combining engineering or an engineering mindset and cooking and being unabashedly geeky about all of these things that I love. Once I did that, the quality of the things I produced started getting a lot better. This is duck prosciutto that I aged in a wine refrigerator. This is what happens when you run 110 volts of household current through a small pickle. The point here is that I didn't really care if anybody else thought this was cool. I thought it was cool. I was doing it for me, and it just so happened that these things seemed to resonate. This is, you centrifuge peas, you take just 3% in this middle layer, and then you drizzle it over toast for breakfast. It's absolutely delicious. And people started to notice. They put me on the cover of Seattle Weekly in full geek face, which is cool, and things really started to get traction. Then I found great playmates. Now, I actually can't take credit for finding these playmates. This is how it went down. I got an email from a guy named Jethro, sent to me and Eric, who's here tonight, saying, hey, want to come over and experiment with this stuff together. If I will give one piece of prescriptive advice, if a guy named Jethro emails you and invites you over to his house, just go, do it. This is me, Jethro, and Eric. We had just gotten copies of Modernist Cuisine. I show this picture because this is what the best creative environment looks like. It's having fun. It's playing. Creativity and play need to occupy the same energy and the same space. And that's what we did. We would get together and have these, we called them jam sessions. And in these sessions, there were no rules. Nothing was too crazy. Nothing was off the table. I should point out that that from this, I ended up finding my dream careers. Eric, in the green here in his photo, is now the director of culinary operations at Alinea Aviary Next in Chicago, which is a huge deal. So we've graduated some good stuff out of our little play sessions. The next thing I did, which is not going to be a foreign concept to any engineering-minded people in the audience, is I obsessed. This is a taste test of something for the blog. This happens to be whiskey that was rapidly aged using ultrasonic homogenizer and wood barrel chips, but the markings on the glass are so that we could have a double-blind test without being psychologically influenced by calling one ABC or 1, 2, 3, right? A little bit obsessive. I went through a summer of pizza also. I baked about 100 pizzas over the course of a summer, and in this test, I varied the liquid component. Instead of water, used flavorful stuff. Champagne actually turned out to work really, really well. Bacardi dark rum at the bottom was terrible. It turns out alcohol and gluten don't get together. And in fact, that pizza spontaneously ignited in the oven while it was baking. Which leads me to another really important thing looking in the rearview mirror that I did well. I became friends with failure. Failure is going to happen. It's a part of the creative process. And if you're not failing on a regular basis, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. The key here, though, is about your relationship with failure. It's about not letting it get you down, but seeing it as an inevitable step. And if you get good at it, you can actually fail really well. You can fail quickly and short-circuit a path to a solution that doesn't exist. You can learn from your failures and then move on very quickly. This is one of my favorite failures. I wanted to make glow-in-the-dark oysters, and quinine, which is in tonic water, fluoresces under black lights, and oysters are filter feeders. So I thought, hey, if I put some quinine in a saltwater bath, the oysters will filter it through, and I can shine black light, and they'll glow. How cool. Turns out quinine is super poisonous to oysters, so they all died instantly. And if it's not already clear, one of the other things that I did is I cherished absurdity. There's this fantastic talk that John Cleese gives on creativity that you might still be able to find online. And he points out that a joke and creativity are the same thing. A joke takes two separate frames of reference and connects them. And it's that connection that you don't see coming that makes us laugh. Well, the creative process is the same, taking two separate frames of reference and connecting them. And having a sense of humor and being absurd is an important part of that process. Here's an example. I decided to cut seaweed paper with a laser because I thought it'd be cool. And then I thought, hey, butterfly shrimp. Now this has absolutely zero utility if this is not already clear, right? But some years later, Ferran Adria, the best chef in the world, one of the most innovative chefs in human history, came to the lab. This is him holding a tortilla that I laser-etched his face onto in the spirit of the Virgin Mary appearing on your toast. So it turned out that all of that absurd time playing with the laser paid off for something. The final point here is that I took risks that I could tolerate. Now, a lot of people have this romantic view that entrepreneurs will jump in with both feet and are totally fearless and will, mortgage the house and do the whole thing. That's not me at all. I'm actually super, super risk averse. So when it came time to launch the Sancerre as a business, Kickstarter was a very attractive kind of thing. All I would risk is some sweat equity and making a fool of myself. We launched the Sancerre on Kickstarter a little over a year ago, trying to raise $100,000 in 30 days. We raised $100,000 in 13 hours. And we went on to raise this much in 30 days and launch the company. Now, the reason I'm showing this to you is because all of those muscles I had been developing along the way led to this and whatever comes next. Your path may not be a straight line. Mine certainly wasn't. But I encourage you to pour yourself into the things you love doing. You never know when they'll pay off. Thanks so much.